Okay, so we've got some problems on the Chevy Silverado. This is an 04 Chevy Silverado with the Duramax. It's a 2500 HD. We've got some front end problems, so it's going to be quite a project, but I'm going to go over a couple of things that I found that's wrong and probably need replaced. Then we'll start tearing it apart and taking a look at it in the other videos. But right now we're going to talk about the things that we saw that's wrong. First of all, we'll start with the really obvious stuff here. There's no cover, protective cover on here, not a big deal, but there should be a cover right there to prevent rust and corrosion. Secondly, you can see that this is the reason that it's off of service right now. We only have half a brake rotor that lost all vibration, or it broke apart, and the caliper has come out. The pistons have pushed out so far that it's actually leaking brake fluid on the ground. Might be able to see that. But the pads are wasted, calipers wasted. When you're looking at a decent truck, you can see those pads, or the pistons, are all the way out because the inside half of this thing is broke off. Let me show you the other side. So this side actually doesn't look too bad. You can see I've got a full rotor here. It's a little marked up, surface stuff, but actually it's pretty thick. It doesn't look too bad. There's the cap, it's intact. It's been tampered with once, so you can tell the hub bearing's probably been done. When you look inside your inspection hole right here, on the back of your caliper there'll be an inspection hole. And you can look in there and see how much pad. And right now we're down to about, on the inside pad, you can see, see if I can help you out there, but inside pad over here all the way to your left is the outside of the pad, the middle part. Then in the center is actually your pad material. Then on the right hand side is your rotor. So if you look in the center, you'll see that small line. Well, right there is about 1/4 inch wide. That should be about 1/2 or maybe 5/8 even on a heavy duty truck. So you'll find that these pads are about, they've got 1/4, less than 1/2 life left on them. But to show you when we're looking at things, how to diagnose it. And let's go back over to the other side and I'll show you what we found. There's a lot of vibration coming from the front end. So what we looked at is, I'm just taking a pry bar right here, and with the pry bar I'm just going to put it on a solid point, and we've come around here and we're looking at the lower ball joint. So I'm going to use my pry bar just to pry up on this thing, and you can see all that play we've got in that lower ball joint. So it's pretty obvious that lower ball joint right down here should not have any movement, and there's a lot of play in that. So anytime you can put a pry bar maybe right in this spot, and you can check to see if you get any movement in there. In this case we're getting a lot of movement. With that same spot you can kind of look and you can check some other areas. You can check your control arm bushings to see how they look, and there's quite a bit of play in those also. You can check the front ball joint, and front ball joint actually doesn't look too bad, but I can hear a lot of wobbling and vibration in the control arms. So we can just poke around a little bit with the pry bar, and it's pretty sloppy in there. So definitely you look in there, there's some space. These control arm bushings are shot. I think the ball joint's okay, but you know, as bad as everything else is suspension wise in this, then I'm just going to replace the whole control arm. So that's our plan. We're going to replace this whole control arm through here. It'll come with the fresh bushings in here. It'll come with the fresh ball joint. Since we have to replace the control arm, the brakes, and the lower ball joint, we're going to have to take a lot of stuff off. Start with, we're going to have to take off the brakes, then we'll have to take off the rotors. All that's coming off anyway to do the brake job. we're going to have to take off the hub nut. When I take this off, I need to get a replacement because you can only use these one time. After the hub nut comes off, we'll have to take the whole hub off from the back side. It'll slide forward. That brings me to the next thing I noticed. When I come up here, I noticed a tear in that axle boot right there. So, taking a look at this axle boot, I saw a tear in there. As I looked above it, I could see grease on the bottom of the frame. So there's heavy grease up here on the top, on the bottom of the frame. And start to play with this, I can get a little bit of play in and out, which I can hear seems to be coming from inside these boots. They're universal joints. And when there's a tear in this boot like this, it starts to let water, moisture, and stuff like that in. Not only is that tear in that boot right here, I think it's centrifugal force is throwing the grease out up onto the top of the frame. So I found this same symptom on both sides of the truck. So we're going to have to talk about possibly changing these front axles. So we got possibly, see, 2 front axles. While we're at it, the shocks, we tested the truck sort of just to bounce it up and down before we took the wheels off, and it wants to bounce a lot where it should dampen it and come back up slowly, have some resistance. These shocks are definitely blown, so we're going to have to end up working on the shocks too. So what we found in this is a pretty good sized project. Brakes, rotors, caliper, lower ball joint, upper ball joint, control arm, bushings, shocks, possibly axle. So quite a project here. I'll make several videos when I change each one of these things so we can look at each one of them. I just thought I'd show you the diagnosis on that. What to look for on stuff like these axles is you want to grab the axle with your hand, and you want to see if there's any play before up there. That's normal. So it's normal that you'll see where it bolts to the front differential to move back and forth some. However, if there's play beforehand, like this, I can hear I can get movement down here and some movement up there before it actually moves, and it's quite noisy. I've got a lot of, seems like a lot of in and out motion too. So I think that even though these might not be all the way bad, I think they're definitely on their way out. So that's something to look for. You can also try to hold this joint and see if you get more movement. On the good note, what I've noticed is back in here, the steering components, back there you can see the pitman arm, the back of the pitman arm, and these tie rods. Now the tie rod ends have been replaced, I think, pretty recently. So what we've noticed on these tie rod ends is that, see if I can get the light in a good spot for you to see. As I turn the wheel, if I put pressure on it, it's moving, but you notice the whole thing's moving as a unit. I don't see play. If I grab the tie rod, it shakes, pull it, I don't see any play there. You can use your pry bar. You can get in here to try to pry it to see if you see any movement. And you don't want to do it too much because you don't want to bend it, but you can look at different ways with your pry bar to see if you get any movement. And I'm not getting any movement really on there. Best way is usually just to move the wheel or have somebody in the truck to see if you get any movement or slop. Now you might get movement here where you can see in this joint inside the boot. Either this boot might be torn, which in this situation, look at the boot and it's good. That's a Moog, so it's definitely been replaced at some point. Moog's good quality, so it's been replaced. And you look at the boot here, the boots down here look okay too, they're not torn. I'm not seeming to get any play in this tie rod end or in this end right here. I don't seem to get any play at the joint at the pitman arm either. So I've checked this, and it looks like our tie rods and our front components there are in good shape, which is a-okay. However, we have issues with the front axles, this is also considered a CV boot, constant velocity axle. So that's called a CV joint, and that's your boot. And whenever you get tears in the boot, like we've seen right there, sometimes those tears, they might happen in the wrinkles. So if the tears are happening inside here in the wrinkles, you want to push it and pull it a little bit to see how big those holes are. In some instances, you can actually look inside there and see if there's an issue. So we're going to make a couple videos on this one, starting with the brakes. Let's get to it.